Hi, I'm Béatrice Séguin, PhD. What used to be that time of the month is now this time of the month. Welcome to our community, a curated space for everyone going through perimenopause and menopause. A place where we can find support, good laughs, great tips on products, and lots of education on health. There's beauty in aging. Whatever beautiful means to you, this time of the month will help you find it and live it. The content expressed in this time of the month is not intended to be a substitute for medical advice. The views and opinions expressed on this show are those of the speakers. Sasha Djumic, welcome to this time of the month.
Thank you so much.
I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm excited too, and a little bit nervous. It's weird.
No, I get it. We're new to this, but we're not new to each other.
No, we're not.
No. So when did we meet?
I think it's been a few years now. 2 years, 2.5.
3?
Maybe 3.
Pre-pandemic for sure. So I'm going to go on the 3
At
to
least,
4,
you're right.
actually.
My whole scope of space and time is completely skewed now since the pandemic.
I think that's everyone's problem.
Yeah.
I feel like it was just a big blur in it.
I don't know if it's Tuesday or April, you know?
Yeah, I feel you. I have your bio here, but I'm not going to read it all in one shot.
Okay.
I'm going to highlight some things that I think our audience will find really, interesting about you. So I'm going to start with the fact that you are a registered nurse.
That's my professional background.
Yeah, so tell me about that.
So I've been a nurse now for about 10 years. I think 2013 I graduated, which seems crazy to say because it doesn't feel like that long. Mm-hmm. But my clinical background precedes my aesthetic background. So when you start out in nursing, nobody tells you about cosmetics, aesthetics, right? The goal is you're going to get a job in a hospital, you're going to work there for the next 40 years, take your pension and your wages, and you'll be happy with it, which sounds great on the surface when you're new to it, right? It's a good job, it's a good career, it's very rewarding, especially if you like science and medicine and working with people, but that wasn't my experience.
I can relate to that. And I know that's sort of what we've talked about in the past. I have a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences. I did the hardcore science training.
You went all the way.
All the way. And I loved it. But never once in my training did someone say I could have alternate careers using that background.
Or a little bit of everything.
Or a little bit of everything. And it took me till now to mix it all up. So, from science to cosmetics, a common love, different aspect.
But very similar too.
Yeah, very, very similar. So what made you realize cosmetic aesthetics, non-surgical cosmetic aesthetics, what made you think, hey, I'm going to explore this?
That was a bit of a process, if I'm going to be honest, right? I did the hospital stuff, didn't pan out. I worked in home care, research, best practice. I went and did my master's in still a clinical side of things, thinking, this is the career path.
Yeah,
that I'm going to keep pursuing.
Masters of Science in Nursing.
In nursing, exactly.
Seriously.
So I thought clinically this was my wheelhouse, right? Eventually, that's the beautiful thing about nursing is there's so many different rungs to the ladder. You're never really stuck in one place, but I never felt fulfilled wherever I was. As soon as I get a little saturated with the work I'm doing, I feel bored is maybe not the right word, but it doesn't hold my attention. If it doesn't hold my attention, my passion isn't there. And if my passion isn't there, I think I've been through more than enough in life to not get stuck in things that don't hold me that way on a daily basis. But my big foray into aesthetics was really sort of a low and high point in my life. So when Dad got diagnosed with melanoma maybe 8 years ago, unfortunately that ended up taking his life. But
I'm so sorry.
That little journey, that little experience with him kind of flung me into dermatology, right? Because melanoma is a type of skin cancer. So finding treatments and things that I could do for him kind of kept popping up, different avenues for skin, for nursing, for me. And then it was sort of like a sign from the universe where one of my friends of a friend of a friend sent me a screenshot of a Snapchat from somebody's page with a training for aesthetics. I was like, do you want to be an injectables nurse? And I was like, that sounds like something I might want to be, right? One thing I haven't done yet. So it was one certificate, one training, a year off, no job. You kind of give up on it. It really wasn't a upward slope.
Line.
No, it was definitely all over the place. But what started as a little side hustle, so to speak, friends, family, just an interest for the art, the science, the medicine, even the humanistic component, right? When you work in a hospital, you don't really get to sit around and get to know people. Now it's become my full-time career for the better part of 4 or 5 years.
And I mean, that's how I found you. As you get older, you start to, I felt like I was losing myself through perimenopause and just the aging process. But it's really scary because there's a lot of pressure. It's like, everybody's doing it. Should I?
I know, especially
yeah.
with how connected we are now.
Yes, we see it
Social
everywhere.
media, we've skewed our vision and our image of what beauty really is. Not we, the powers
The
that
collective
be.
we.
Exactly, the collective we feed into it, right? We give it that juice and that energy, and then people start to believe it, and then our kids see it, and their kids, and it's definitely a thing that's kind of developed since the invention of the internet. But I think we're starting to see the consequences and the repercussions of that.
Tell me more. What do you mean?
Even in our perceptions, like you said, of beauty and ourselves, and our self-confidence and our image and our self-esteem, like all of these things are constantly bombarded by movies and magazines and our phones, right? All of us, no matter how strong we think we are, will sit there for an hour or two a day just scrolling through things that are seemingly meaningless, but you absorb it, right? It plants seeds. It grows.
So how do you balance that as a career? How do you approach the aesthetics and your clients? What makes you different?
So one of the things that I think really drew me into this industry is I saw a lot of examples in the streets and in the mall and at work of what I would consider to be bad injectables, right? We've all seen overblown lips or the big poofy alien cheeks, which I think is a combination of both people losing that perception, but also the practitioners that are working with them being so motivated by money and other things that they overlook other components. So my big philosophy on injectables is if people can tell that you had something done to an extent, it's not a good job, right? You kind of lose all the things that make you unique. And if you work in this industry long enough, there's 1,000,001 trainings where they'll talk to you about golden ratios and mathematical and geometric ways of mapping people's faces, but that's not human anatomy, right? We all have completely different backgrounds, bone structures, face shapes, things that make us unique, right?
That's what I notice on
Right?
social media. Some of the big, huge experts, I guess, that
Yeah.
are on their social, they use all the rulers, but what happens is they all look alike.
Thank you. It's a great foundation,
Yeah.
right? There's a standard and a basis to all of these things, but you can't cookie cutter everybody, right? Which is the one thing I really see, like we were talking about, how I notice social media changes people's perception is they won't look at things in a global context, right? When they assess a face or they evaluate a face or analyze a face for what it is, genetically, you start to see that people will isolate different features of their face, right? So you get people that come in, they're like, I want my lips done. And I always say, okay, that's great, but can your face handle bigger lips? Do you have the cheeks to support that? Do you have the jaw structure to support that? Do you have the chin projection to support that, right? Some people look great with bigger lips. Some people, smaller lips are what suit their face, right? And then the wish pics will come in, right? Everybody will bring me Angelina Jolie, but they have a different type of facial structure. And then you have to have the hard conversation of this won't suit you or this isn't possible for you. So
Is hard.
It's very hard.
As a professional,
Yes.
to set a boundary, I suppose, on what you'll do or not do.
Yeah, without hurting somebody's feelings.
For them and not hurt,
So you're always sort of tiptoeing and seesawing on this line of how do I tell people the truth? Because for me, I mean, maybe it's this growing up as a first generation immigrant, like not having money was a part of my life in childhood. So I'm not concerned with that, right? I don't sell, I don't pressure people into things. I don't mind if I don't make a sale today or if I don't treat somebody today. I'd rather have a client that I see for a long period of time when there's a basis of trust and they'll believe that what I'm telling them is in their best interest and not for me trying to make a quick buck.
I mean, that's
And I
why
think
we have a
that's,
long-term
yeah,
relationship.
and I think that's what's missing a lot.
It is, and maybe that's a great, how would someone choose an injector then? What's the advice you would have? I mean, trust for me is so huge,
Yeah.
but what would you say to our extra
Trust
community?
trust is great, but trust takes time to develop, right? Personally, I don't trust somebody I just met immediately off the bat. There's a rapport, there's a relationship that has to be built. So the first thing that I think of is like your first experience with anybody. How do you judge them? What's the first thing you're judging somebody on? Not judging, maybe that's not the right word, but what's the first impression you're getting of someone, whether you think about it or not?
I mean, first their appearance, let's be honest.
Exactly. No matter how much people want to fight that,
Yeah.
it's their appearance first and foremost.
But not necessarily appearance as in, do I think you're attractive or not attractive, or
Yeah.
beautiful, not beautiful? It's more, obviously, if I'm going to you as an injector and you were somehow, and that did happen, I have met some surgeons
I think it's happened to all of
or
us, yeah.
injectors that have that overdone look, and that is scary. So then, no, I don't, yeah.
You pull
So
back.
that's a good tip. That's
You
a
pull
good
back.
intuitive reaction, yeah.
I feel the same. So if a certain injector that you're going to see looks a certain way, but they're preaching the opposite of what they look, I think innately you're not going to trust them, right? There's a disconnect between what they look like and what they're talking about. And whether you think about that maybe initially in the moment or not, it puts a certain distrust in you. How do I know you're going to give me natural results or what I'm looking for when you didn't even know when to draw the line in the sand?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I would say to somebody is look at the way the practitioner looks. And everybody's got different preferences, right? I'm not knocking anybody, right? I like vanilla, you like chocolate. Even in, in cosmetics across the board, beauty
It's subjective.
across the board. It's very subjective, right? I look at a lot of these fashion shows and I go, I don't see it, right? I don't get it. A lot of people love it. And I think that's the same for lipstick. I think it's the same for makeup, for hairstyles, for clothing, for you name it across the board. Everybody's look is subjective. So there are a lot of people that have great reputations, but they don't necessarily mesh with the appearance that somebody is trying to obtain or the goals that they have or the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. And that'll be the first step, I think, is do we mesh in our philosophy on how things are going to look physically in the end? And then everything else comes, right? If this is number one step that's taken in the correct direction, then do I trust you, right? And then you develop that rapport, you develop that relationship. Yeah. I would say right up there with appearance is how much time do they take with you?
Explaining or
teaching
just listening,
you, educating you. Exactly. I think there's a huge misconception and a lot of taboo and stigma around injectables in media, especially.
Yes.
I talk about this all the time. I think the other problem is that the most overdone cases and the people that have a hard time drawing that line in the sand, along with their practitioners, they're always the most vocal ones. So everybody thinks this is the way things have to be, right?
So let's stay there for a second. What are some of these misconceptions and mistakes?
The big one, let's start with Botox, right? Everybody knows Botox, anti-wrinkle medication. The belief is, and I thought the same way too before I got into it. My example was Hollywood and magazines, right? And then the example that you see all the time is just frozen faces, right? No muscle expression, no muscle movement, no emotional capacity in the face. And I think that's a huge misconception, right? There are what I call levels and tiers to both Botox and filler. There are certain things that you're giving up, and there's certain things that you're balancing. But I'd say the big thing is there's two things that I always try to make happen for people. I want the aesthetic to be what they were imagining, and I want longevity of the treatment. So if I can give somebody the aesthetic they were going for, and they didn't necessarily get good longevity out of their treatment, I know it's just a dosage thing when it comes to Botox, right? So if somebody wants a more natural look, they don't have to be completely frozen faced. But there is a balance in terms of it won't last as long. You know, we might have to do more frequent treatments.
Maybe a desire that I gotta get my money's worth. So
That's always the thing too, right? You're gonna spend hundreds of dollars on something that's seemingly extra, right? It's not a necessity of life. It's not something that you have to have. I think it's something that we've become accustomed to. Everybody, it's more accessible than it's ever been, I think. And just based on where we are socioeconomically, I think it's more affordable than it's ever been. Not across the board, of course. It's still very expensive stuff.
Yeah.
I don't detract from that whatsoever. But 15, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have heard the amount of people getting Botox as they do today, right? Men and women alike, different socioeconomic classes, but the examples are still the same, right? The first thing that people tell me when they sit down is I don't want to be frozen, or I don't want to look like so-and-so. Everybody's got an example in their mind of what they don't want, but they haven't seen examples of how it could be and what they might want. And then the other issue is the people that like that philosophy and like that approach, because of that, they also don't want people to know that they get anything done. So you kind of feed back into
this negative. There still is it's weird because it's so prevalent, but there is a bit of a, if you're doing it, you're somehow not loving yourself or accepting the aging process. What do you think about that?
I think it's true, and I think it's a very, I don't want to say convoluted way of thinking, but it goes along with everything else. Like we talk about this in our appointments all the time. If you're getting Botox, chances are you care about the way that you look. If you care about the way that you look, you want some sort of uniformity in your life in that sense, right? So I always tell people, if you're gonna do all this Botox to make sure your skin is smooth and you look like the best version of yourself and you wanna look fresh and rested, but you're not taking care of your skin, what's the point?
So what would you tell someone? Let's take our 30s. What would you say? Let's go there. What would you tell someone in their 30s about how to take care of skin? And then we'll move on by decade.
The big thing that we all know of is just our genetic lottery.
Let's be real. Genetic lottery
Genetics are huge, especially when it comes to skin. I tell all my clients, look at your parents, your grandparents, who probably weren't the best example of all the things that we have available to us in terms of technology, pharmaceuticals, science, longitudinal studies, nutrition. I would argue that they had certain benefits in terms of environment and food and quality of the type of life that they lived. I think they were much more active and definitely had more positive components to the way they grew up generationally, but they didn't know as much as we know. So it's almost, genetics are the number one factor, but I would say your lifestyle is sort of like
major number two.
Major number two. If not a huge impact on number one.
Like let's give genetics a percentage. It's gotta be 80%, 85. I don't know.
I think maybe before it would be for sure more than 80%.
Yeah.
But we have so much technology available to us now that I don't think it plays as much of a factor.
Okay, and then lifestyle. So let's go there. Lifestyle, like hydration.
Nutrition would be number one. Diet and exercise, right? That's the number one thing. People think when you speak about nutrition and diets, everybody just starts to correlate that with the way they look, right? When I talk about diet, it's just, okay, I'm gonna have a certain aesthetic to my body. But it's not, nobody talks about the physiological mechanisms and the processes that happen in the body with a certain diet, right? Low sugar, low processed foods, low processed sugars, I should say, right? Like fruits and everything is still full of sugar, but the way that we consume food nowadays is nobody pays attention to labels. And this is another one of those things where we've allowed it to get to this point. We've allowed companies and industry to feed us these things and nobody's complaining. We buy it, you can't keep it on the shelves, but let's start with basic breakfast stuff, right? Cereals,
go back to basic non-processed food, and that influences our physiology, which skin is our biggest organ.
Everything. Skin is your number one organ. Nobody considers it that.
Yeah, it's our
skin is your biggest organ, covers the entire surface of your body. It's your first defense mechanism against the outside world, right?
Okay, so
Canadian winters.
yeah, dryness.
Dryness, you're exposed to the elements, temperatures. So as soon as your skin is dry, it's much more prone to cracking. Any skin that cracks is skin that has lost its barrier. It's not intact anymore, and you're essentially looking at wounds, right? Anytime you have wounds or open skin, you're susceptible to infection, and then all of these things that come with that.
So just let's think of the most basic improvements that are easy to adopt so that we don't feel like failures, right? We live in a busy time. So lifestyle, a behavior that we can improve on. Hydration, would you say?
Easily. I would say that's step number one for everybody.
Yeah.
Whatever you think you're drinking enough of in terms of water, double it.
Okay. So now we've got genetics, we've got lifestyle. If we're genetics, we can't change. Lifestyle, we have some control over.
Completely modifiable, right?
Then, okay, now let's go to what are some less invasive things we can do and work from there to maybe more invasive and keeping perhaps age in mind again. And we're really focused on midlife here, and that's when we start to notice a lot of the wrinkles or the drop, I'll say it. I feel my lips and my hair is dropping. Those are the things you look at in the mirror. I remember watching Sex and the City, and there was an episode where she'd sit in front of the mirror and look, and that's what you see. You're like, oh, what's happening here? So yeah, let's stick to what are some simple things within aesthetics and then more invasive.
To start, I think it's important that everybody knows we all do that, right? You're not alone in that. All of us feel. I get this from my clients a lot. I think there's a very big gap, or maybe even a fine line, depending on how you want to go about it, between vanity and self-care, right? Wanting to take care of yourself and wanting to look good, I don't think it's vain. I think if you're happy with what you see when you look in the mirror, it's going to affect your brain physiology and your chemistry and your hormones.
And confidence.
Confidence is everything, right? So if the more content you are with what you see when you look in the mirror, the completely different experience in the world, right? You're much more confident, you're much more positive, you're gonna socialize differently, you're gonna put yourself in positions where maybe you wouldn't have if you were more reserved or kind of keep to yourself. But I would say from the focus of midlife, it's the same for all of us, right? We spend our 20s, in our youth and our 30s, basking in the sun, going on vacation. I want to get tan. I want to feel good. I want to go away for the summer. I want to go away in the winter. Who cares about sunscreen? Not a big deal. My skin looks fine, right? But it's really decades later that we start to see the repercussions and the consequences of that.
So sunscreen's the number one non-invasive tip.
Number one thing you can do.
Yeah, that's a great tip, and it's, yeah.
And the one thing you probably know from pharmaceuticals is when it comes to skincare, one is not the same as the other, right? Things that I can buy at Shoppers, for example, that don't have any active ingredients in them is not the same as something you can buy in a dermatology office or a medical spa where there's pharmaceutical grade and medical grade ingredients in it.
The grade, the concentration, the mix, it's also...
Exactly, the ingredients.
The ingredients, how they interact with each other, yeah.
Absolutely. So I'd say the biggest thing to make it nice and simple when it comes to sunscreen is there's two types. You have physical blockers and chemical blockers. The average banana boat, what are these other ones that we put on our kids?
I like Sunbum for kids.
Copper tone, Sunbum, right? The average one, I won't say across the board because they all got different lines, is a chemical sunscreen. So what they do is the UVA and the UVB rays that come from the sun, instead of deflecting them from the body and the skin, it absorbs them into the skin. So you're not getting a burn per se, right? You're not getting a sunburn, but your cells are absorbing all that UV radiation.
And then the damage to your DNA.
And then the damage to your DNA, quite literally mutation of cells.
Exactly, yeah.
Prevalence of skin cancer and melanoma is through the roof nowadays.
Yeah.
And that kind of mutation of cells doesn't even have to present itself as melanoma, right? The big thing I would say is opt for a physical blocker. So there's physical sunscreens, and typically the most active ingredient will be some sort of zinc oxide.
Yes.
It'll look a little bit more chalky.
It's definitely more chalky.
It's not as aesthetic as something that'll soak into your skin, but technology has come a long way with that too, right? Like we hold a lot of physical zinc sunscreens that have like almost a tinted foundation to them, right? So they'll blend in with your skin.
I like using those.
They won't look. I think I gave you one to try. They won't look as chalky and white on the skin because everybody wants to protect themselves, but they also want to look good too. Absolutely, you don't want to walk around looking even more pale than they are in the Canadian winters when we don't have sun for 6 months at a time.
Yeah.
But that's one thing where technology is working to our advantage. The more we advance, the more we know, the more conducive we can make it to our lifestyle. But there's more options now than there were 20 years ago.
If I could go back to my 14-year-old self, that's what I would tell Béatrice at 14.
We all would.
Oh my goodness. I mean, the era of using oil.
Absolutely. Maximum tan.
Listening to Bon Jovi with my...
Quite literally oil.
Literally oil, Bon Jovi playing, and those reflectors.
All the way, yeah.
Reflectors.
You went all the way.
I went all the way. I tell her, quit that right now, and that's what I tell my daughter. And it is decades. You don't realize it.
And it was even when I was in high school, 15 years ago, I remember every girl before school, after school, on their lunch break was at the tanning salon.
Yes, the
Everybody
tanning
had
salon.
the maximum tan oils.
I forgot about that fad, yeah.
So it was wild. And you could see it in the color. The color is unnatural, right? The body is fighting it.
Be kind to ourselves. Drink and wear sunscreen. That's the really non-invasive. Okay, now let's
That's the basic stuff that I think everybody can do. It's cheap, it's affordable, it's things we're probably already doing.
Huge
impact. Biggest impact you're gonna get.
My cancer doctor husband will agree to this part of this segment. He'll be really proud that that's what
all of them will. The oncologists, the dermatologists, everybody in the industry, even pharmaceutically, will agree.
Yes.
This is the best stuff we can do. Then you get into, I'd say, less accessible, really luxury things that not everybody can afford, right? These are certain privileges where you get into hundreds and hundreds of dollars of medical grade ingredients, peptides and vitamin C's and cleansers and toners and things we can talk about all day long that I think would be beneficial to everybody, but not everybody has that privilege.
And they do range in price.
They do.
I will say that, you
drastically, I will say too.
Perhaps, when we're not going to get into brands, but let's highlight some key ingredients that if you can find some of those key ingredients, let's just go name one key ingredient in a cleanser that you would look for.
The cleanser, I would say you have the most flexibility in.
Okay.
I always opt for the most natural stuff, depending on the type of skin that you have, because that's really important too, right? If you have very oily skin or even conversely very dry skin, there's certain things you want to avoid. You don't need the soaps and the glycerins, but if you're somebody that has very oily skin and you exercise a lot and you're in and out of the gym and you have a very busy lifestyle, which is I think the average parent, right? You need something that'll remove all of that dirt, debris, sweat, makeup from your skin. Cleanser, as far as I'm concerned, I have people in the industry that would argue me. You can go with the CeraVe from Shoppers. Or Cetaphil, the basic stuff from Sephora, wherever you like to shop. The most important thing is you're getting all of that dirt and debris off your skin.
All right. Toner.
Toner, I think, is a different story, right? Toner, what it's really going to do is balance the acidity of your skin. And acidity is huge, right? We've heard all these buzzwords in the last 5 years, I think, even in diet and exercise. You want alkaline water, alkaline this, alkaline that. We won't get into that because that's a whole other, fad thing where they really push a lot of things that don't make sense from even a scientific standpoint. And I'm sure you can agree with that. Yeah. But a toner is more important. The ingredients themselves don't vary too much. The price does.
Yes.
But toners are generally not that expensive. I would say for $30, $40, you can get a good toner. The other thing I say with a lot of my clients is they'll soak their face in toner. You don't necessarily have to do that. I think whatever you have, a couple of squirts, you dab it after your cleanser, that's about it. You're really just trying to balance that pH.
Okay, so that's the key there.
And I wouldn't worry too much about the ingredients in toner
And
because
all the other stories around it. It's really
they can't
about
vary
balancing.
much.
Okay. Okay.
They can't vary much. When you get really into it and you have, you know, a 15-step skincare routine, we'll talk about
but who has time?
That's another thing, right?
No.
These are luxuries. I think the most important thing for the average person who's got a busy everyday life, did you cleanse? Did you tone? You're going to get benefits that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
And then for me, especially with the maturing skin, I've noticed a huge difference after I tone.
Yeah.
I do use a blend of acids every night, and that is visible.
Which ones do you use?
It's a plant complex, and it basically has glycolic acid, succinic acid, and salicylic acid.
Excellent.
I do have, that's so annoying that the acne comes back in your perimenopause and menopause. So the salicylic acid, for everyone, it's antibacterial. So that's really what that's doing. Tell me about the glycolic and the succinic. Tell our viewers.
So there's...
Or other acids you would recommend. That's what works for me.
Those are the three big ones, right? You heal glycolic acids, you heal here salicylic. Even if you get chemical peels and facials, they might use different variations and concentrations of those three big ones.
Lactic acid.
Lactic acid's another one. They are on a varying level of how aggressive they are, right? Some will cause more redness, some will cause more irritation. But it'll be mostly down to the concentration of it, right? So if you have a basic, you might even have cleansers for people that have oily skin that will have combinations of different acids in it. And that's just to strip all of that oil and that sebum away from these glands. Now for aging skin, you have hormonal differences, right? Then we get into, you know, pillowcases and all that crazy stuff.
I sleep with a silk pillowcase.
It makes a difference, right? This is where you just start to add little things into your everyday routine. But from a chemical standpoint, these acids will exfoliate. So what they're doing is after you cleanse and you tone, or if you have it included into any of those initial first steps of your skincare routine, is they'll get rid of dirt, debris, oil, sebum, but you're also going to exfoliate dead skin cells from the surface.
And why is it important to exfoliate and get rid of those dead skin cells on our surface?
This is one of those things when I learned it, I thought, duh, right, it makes the most sense. But the more dead skin cells you have that are sloughing on the surface of your skin, the less you're allowing any of the ingredients you're putting on your skin to actually do their work. So if your pores are clogged up, if your skin has, you know, 3 days worth of moisturizer on it because it's middle of winter and you can't talk because of how chapped your lips are, or you feel your cheeks cracking or whatever it is, you're basically just adding layers of glue to your skin the bacteria will just attach onto.
So
and the bacteria builds, skin cells build. None of that work that you're putting into it is actually absorbing into your skin.
All right, so everybody, we need to exfoliate.
Everybody.
If you're not doing it, get on it.
I wouldn't say make exfoliation a part of your everyday routine, but, you know, once a week, once a month, or if you'd like, there's a lot of things that people do on top of their skincare routine is they'll have a cleanser, toner, moisturizer. I would say that's a basic for anybody. Yeah. And if you're really into your skin, especially aging skin, right, it will lose that elasticity, you have less collagen production, you have a less elastin production. You want it to keep that thickness and that turgor that it has, retinol would be your best choice.
Right. And so my last step is my moisturizer with retinol.
With your retinol, exactly. And that's another one of those things that a lot of people are scared of. They don't want to burn, they don't want to get inflammation, they might have hyperpigmentation in their skin, they might have melasma, they might have hormonal changes.
And melasma gets worse
in
menopause.
It's a huge one.
Melasma is just like you get darkening.
It's pretty much hyperpigmentation is what melasma is. The one thing that distinguishes melasma from other types of hyperpigmentation that people might have, like from sun or rosacea or even genetically, is it'll tend to be symmetrical on both sides, right? So if you have a little speck or freckle or stain on one cheek, you're probably going to have a very similar one on the other cheek. Upper lip is prevalent for a lot of people as well. But proper use of all of these skincare ingredients can help to keep that melasma under control. Yeah. And I'll tell you, you probably know this from a pharmaceutical standpoint. This is where food is really important too. Any disease in the body, any disease process, any illness, any sort of hyperpigmentation, any dermatitis, any eczema, any inflammation that you have is food related. Almost across the board. Genetically, we have different predispositions to things, right? Some people have a gluten allergy, other people don't. But I would even argue that the quality of what we eat is very important in that too. Now, if you're eating foods that are, for you, inflammatory, and even that's not across the board the same for everybody,
it's
right?
variable, yeah.
I know people that can eat cheese all day long, and then other people that are maybe lactose intolerant or whatever it may be, causes different levels of inflammation in the body. If you can find these trigger points in your diet, I promise you, all of these things will become, if not non-existent, drastically lessened. So if you have eczema, if you have dermatitis, if you have any sort of inflammation in the body, even if we get into serious illnesses, and you're eating a ton of processed sugars, you know, cereals, cookies, muffins, you stop by Timmy's, get a bagel on the way.
Even acne can get worse with processed sugars and things like that.
Right.
So not to forget the important component
impact
of what we put in our body, and then this routine we just described. You know, it helps. Okay, so now, we've gone from really low, you know, water, sunscreen, a good skincare routine, and the routine itself matters a lot. And I'm going to talk about that in my S minute, because it's also just about doing it regularly for a long time.
That's the thing. Do things, I would say to anybody that's buying new products and testing them out, no less than 3 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
I would say even a month. You can't really tell if something works unless you've given it a chance, right? And we do this all the time, especially it's the new year, people have resolutions. Here's this new diet I found. 3 days in, oh, it's not doing anything.
Yeah, skincare, it's not reducing my lines, or it's not doing this or that. So, okay, so now we're going to move
80% of the time,
sorry, go ahead. Yes, it's the doing it regularly for extended
anything.
You play a long game. Longevity is a long game. That's what it's called. So the health and the routines we follow. So one of the things Sasha told us we can do is have a really good skincare routine. And routine was the key word that I picked up from his advice. I've been using a particular brand called Miracle 10 for 10 years now. And it's a Toronto, Canada company. The first step in my skincare routine, no matter how tired or busy I am, I know it can be hard, it doesn't take long, but I cleanse. Take all that makeup off and the grit of the day, and then I follow up with my toning. And the toning is really just about balancing that pH in your skin, so don't skip it. Sometimes it's tempting to skip it, don't. Your skin will thank you in the long run. And then for my skin, that mix of acids, glycolic acid being one of the ingredients that exfoliates, and then another one, the salicylic acid, is antibacterial, so it really helps with that menopausal acne. And I really don't see much acne with this repeated use, so I absolutely love this part. And then I always finish off with a nice moisturizer full of nourishing ingredients to cap off the night. So really all of this may seem like a lot, but I can probably do this in the space of 5 minutes. Everybody has 5 minutes. I mean, just don't scroll on Instagram for 5 minutes and do this instead. You'll come back and thank me one day.